Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Our topic today is enabling authority to operate in the U.S. federal government with SD elements. U.S. federal government agencies are under more pressure than ever before to modernize their IT systems and consistently deliver better services at lower costs. They also must comply with increasingly stringent cybersecurity requirements in order to obtain authority to operate. Rapidly developing and deploying secure software in a way that meets ATO requirements, especially within environments where software project volume, complexity, and delivery pace is high and security expertise is in short supply, makes attaining ATO or maintaining continuous ATO extremely difficult. SD Elements is a trusted secure application development platform for U.S. federal government agencies that integrates with DevSecOps methodologies and helps enable rapid or continuous ATO attainment at scale. Before I introduce you to our speakers, let's quickly go through some housekeeping items. A recording of this webinar will be available after today's event. You will receive an email with a link to the recording, and we will also be publishing this in the resources section of our website. Also, we encourage everyone to raise questions. Please submit your questions into the Q&A box and we will address them during the Q&A session. And lastly, if you would like to follow up with us or if you have a topic you would like to see covered in a future webinar, please email us at contact@securitycompass.com. I am pleased to introduce you to today's speakers, Jay Ryan and Joseph Rowe. Jay is an avid technologist with nearly 20 years of experience in leading operations for the federal and commercial security community. He has developed and led programs for commercial companies, as well as multiple commands within the Department of Defense and agencies of the U.S. intelligence community with the focus on IoT and C5 ISR solutions. In his role with Security Compass as the U.S. Federal Program Manager, he leads a cross-functional federal team focused on growing adoption of SD elements within the Department of Defense and the federal government customer base. Joseph is an Army veteran who served with the 32nd Signal Battalion in Darmstadt, Germany. After finishing his enlistment, Joseph worked in the insurance field for a number of years while completing his Bachelor of Business Computer Information Systems from the University of North Texas. Joseph has previously worked as both a sales engineer and a sales engineer manager in the API management field. Currently, Joseph is a solutions engineer at Security Compass supporting SD Elements. But without further ado, I will pass it off to Jay to kick things off.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me well. Don't sleep on Joseph's bio there. Joseph is the man when it comes to all things SD. So looking forward to the presentation he's going to give here at the end when we do a full run through of SD Elements. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be part of the team here at SD Elements, or excuse me, Security Compass for SD Elements. The big thing to take away from my user experience, SDE is a tool that's really genuinely making a difference and is driving DevSecOps within our community. So we're excited to bring that to you today. What's in it for you, right? We always kind of want to know that. Likely you're here. I see a number of you here on our participants panel. We've done a number of talks when it comes to, what is ATO, CTO, and some of the theory behind that. And no doubt you've attended all of the presentations Nicholas has given on the Platform One side for all of that. Really what we're here to talk about today is the nuts and bolts of using SDE for the process of achieving ATO, or at least really getting your DevSec pipeline in order. So hopefully by the end of the day, you'll understand how SDE will help you pursue authority to operate and get software in the hands of end users faster. And hopefully we give you a better understanding of how to implement SDE as an automated system to ensure applications, both new and existing, for upgrades can conform to NIST RMF or other compliance standards you might be chasing as necessary to really enable scale across your software portfolio. Next slide. All right. So our mission inside the Fed DoD space, at Security Compass, we're really driving to create a world where you can trust software. But more specifically in the federal space, it's really to support our federal and DoD customers in their DevSecOps initiatives. To drive software at the speed of mission, to build software out and get it in the hands of the end users as fast as possible so they can make a difference in the world and what they're doing. It's really critical that our US federal customers have the ability to not just shift security left, but with using SDE to have the capacity to build secure software from the very start. And that's really what we're working hard to enable. SDE Elements enables, you can stay right there. I'll tell you when to go over, Kel, but thank you. We'll work on our ESP here to get the slide changes going. But SD Elements enables developers to build or modify software to meet security compliance standards, with NIST 853 being only one of the many baked-in compliance standards included in our content library. And we'll discuss that further in a few slides as well. SD Elements has a robust set of integrations with your scanning tools to ingest results and verify compliance. Positioning is an essential part of your regular workflow. And the results of both the dev and security team's efforts can then be integrated into an auditable and traceable report for really demonstrating regulatory standard compliance. Now, the end result being the demonstrated elements necessary for trust, which is what we're all trying to get to in the assessor's mind, your ISM, your ISO, so they can really get behind what you've built, create that certificate to field, and ultimately completion of the ATO process. Next slide. All right, so current ATO, CATO challenges, and guarantee a number of you out there are practitioners in this space and have probably felt some of this at one point in time or another, but really it's building software from the start in line with defined compliance requirements. That's the panacea of DevSecOps and bringing security and the development teams together. Old approaches, really even including the best in Agile, can lead to slow results when software is really needed in the hands of the end user quicker and faster. So with some of the new devs coming to your teams, and even experienced devs having limited security expertise and exposure, oftentimes to like NIST 853 or some of the other regulatory compliance, if they've come commercial into the Fed space, it's really great to be able to give them the right tasks to complete in order to create a secure and compliant software. And we do that right where they work in the regular issue tracking system, the integration of which and how that works, Joseph will demonstrate here shortly. When we talk broken communication, really often the back and forth between security and dev teams can result in a loss and misunderstanding of requirements. We really help kind of prevent that with SDE and resolve that through focused tasks and guidance on coding, secure coding examples, and just-in-time training, really in compliance with the selected regulation. All of this kind of comes together to really help teams overcome weaknesses in application code and design, and ultimately leads to the creation of a body of data that supports assertions for ATO assessments or supported continuous monitoring requirements that are really necessary now for the CATO concepts. Next slide. All right, so our first poll. Raquel, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, perfect. So we will have a couple poll questions that come up during this webinar, but the first one we have here is, how long does it take for your organization to obtain ATO? So 0 to 3 months, 4 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, or 12 plus months. So we'll give you guys just a couple of seconds to answer that.
Hosts and panelists can't vote. Be good if we could. Really interested to see what a number of you have to say on this. We've got an existing federal survey that's out in the market right now. This is kind of one of the questions. We've seen some very interesting numbers come back with different organizations when we have this conversation with them. So we're looking forward to what we got here. Wow, all right. 38% coming in at 4 to 6 months. 0 coming in under 3 months. That's really interesting. So it looks like a number of you are still having trouble if you're in that 6 month plus mark. Really making this happen fast. Awesome, thank you for that, Raquel. Next slide. So improving effectiveness and efficiency, the reduction of vulnerabilities from the start that really SDE, our software, SD Elements, our software, SDE as I refer to it, enables contributes directly to recovered time and ultimately costs. It's less security personnel are spending time finding and pointing out vulnerabilities, and devs are spending less time on remediation work. So that ultimately results in that time and cost savings, especially when it comes to preparing for ATO. And it can directly assist enabling ATO when employed during continuous monitoring. I think I spoke to that on the previous slide, but we'll probably beat that one up across the next coming weeks and months as everyone tries to shift in that direction of building trust and being able to get towards CATO operations. Next slide. All right, so interesting that we got those poll results, and I'm interested to go and kind of absorb those a little bit further. But really, we did a deep dive to look at kind of ROI from what our customers were getting out of their application of SDE. So in our customer work and developing that supporting ROI data, we were able to really view the impact of implementing SD elements into the workflow. When customers were able to see essentially 90% plus reduction in high and medium vulnerabilities as a result of kind of the task-based approach that we take towards helping developers figure out what they need to build to. We call that kind of our compliance line approach that we enable. So when talking about prepping for getting ATO'd and out the door, software-wise to end users, this clearly assists in enabling faster, secure software delivery. We also have some case study offerings around our support to federal customers, which we can make available on our resources page for our Fed program as well, that you can go and read about how we've enabled some of our customers like Platform One, Kessel Run, and others inside the Air Force to really move faster when it comes to ATO, definitely much faster than 6 months. I know Platform One has some solutions that are ATOing in less than a week, which is really great and amazing. Next slide. All right, so how are we doing it? I've kind of already spoken to it a little bit, and I apologize if I'm going a little bit faster here. I'm really just trying to get through my piece here so we can get to the bread and butter, which is Joseph showing you how the software works and how we're doing that in a demo. But really, we allow you to, one, very quickly identify the requirements, increase developer productivity because we're giving you code examples, we're giving you task-based instruction, task alignment, all inside of Jira and the other tools that you're already using to really align yourself to what needs to get done. From there, you can integrate against your scanners, bring everything back into a central location, and that really allows you to avoid that expense when it comes to remediation. From there, we create detailed reporting that you can easily export and share with your assessors so you can demonstrate that compliance. Again, the integrations with all these tools, fairly seamless. We have a number, which I'll show you here in a moment, which you're ready to go right out of the box. And then from there, that really gives you the ability to scale your ability to create new software, validate that software, and then make sure you're getting that in front of the assessor at scale. Next slide. So just kind of a cross section here of our existing US federal government customers. So right now we are in Platform One at the Iron Bank. So you can go and get our secure containers from IB right now if you're looking to deploy us in support of a product or a project you're building out. We're working now to get built into Big Bang. So if you're using Platform One in the Big Bang, deploying an instance there, we're going to be baked into that here in the near future. That's a major effort underway, but you can get us now. And then we also have commercial container deployments that you can put up on different versions of your IL series to really deploy SDE and get it into your workflow. But we're very pleased to be supporting these federal government customers, and it is definitely a privilege for us to continue to do this on a day-to-day basis. Next slide. All right, so the ATO compliance workflow, what it really comes down to is a survey that allows you to really characterize what your project's going to look like, what you're trying to build, front end, back end, microservice, et cetera. From there, based upon what you select and based upon the frameworks, regulatory-wise, that you select as well, that really develops a series of tasks and activities for your practitioners to go and implement. From there, you have sample code, test plans, just-in-time training, all of that integrated into your issue tracking system. From there, you get to work, build your project, bring that back into the reporting piece, again, present that to your assessor, allow for the verification that all those tasks have been completed, that you are in compliance with the regulatory bodies that you've essentially gone out and said you need to assert yourself against, make that available to your ISO ATO. That's the simple workflow. That's put in as fast as we can get it. Granted, we're kind of simplifying the ATO process a little bit. There's much more that happens on the back end side with your ISM and ISO that's out of our control, but really we're there to get you there as fast as possible versus that long-term ramp up before you can start the ATO process. Next slide. All right, so extensive integrations out of the box, the big ones being your issue tracking and software where you're working on a day-to-day basis, getting those tasks in there so your devs really understand what they're doing. Our just-in-time training and other elements, secure code examples and stuff are baked right into your issue tracker at that point when they get assigned. So your devs never have to leave the tool that they work in. They don't have to worry about coming to SDE, even though they can if they'd like to. But we see a number of our Fed customers working it that way where they push down to their issue tracking system everything happens there. So the devs are working in one central location. Backfilling, task completion being reported back to SDE, and the ability to move on to that reporting piece. Integration of security code scanning for SaaS and DaaS tools. A number of those out of the box, the big hitters there that are primarily being used by most of the platforms. Integrate the results into SDE so they can be validated against the larger task model to demonstrate completion. It really gives you a holistic picture for your assessor. And then integration with CI/CD pipeline. It's really a beautiful thing. Next slide. So the one thing that we kind of sleep on a little bit, I think, is evangelizing the knowledge base in our content library that we make available to everyone. We have a very robust content team headed up by a number of PhDs who do deep research into mapping, essentially, all these requirements into individual tasks, what needs to be done on a developer basis. So that takes a pretty complex approach, and we make all of that available in our content library. You can currently see here right now a number of these which are really Fed focused and available to you. I saw we had a previous question here, someone asking for FedRAMP, and FedRAMP is in fact mapped in there. But the big ones, NIST 853, 171 for CUI and non-federal systems, right? All of that's there. If you're working on a national security system and you need CNNSI 1253, we've got that available as well. We also have the ability to import other data overlays for larger compliance requirements as well. So that process is there. You're welcome, Dan. Hopefully, if you have further questions, we can help you out there. Also, a very detailed knowledge base, right? And so I kind of spoke to already a research team of over 20 personnel headed up by a number of PhDs doing that. There's my talking point. But beyond that, they're really interested in what they do. I have great conversations with the research team, and I learn something every time I engage with them. So that's one of the big things we are putting out there in the marketplace. I think there's a big sell on what SD Elements provides. Our release time, I'm the product manager on the product side for US Fed. And my job is really to ask the product managers to build and provide what the federal market needs, right? And those product managers do a tremendous job running a DevOps team. They're running releases every 6 weeks. I can't say enough about how fast they make updates to the product and make new characteristics and elements available when the government needs that. So great job there on that side. And also, again, NIST 853 baked in. We also have HIPAA compliance if you're looking for that. I know a number of folks are worried about PII, and maybe in the healthcare space, especially with VA and other folks handling individual healthcare requirements on the HR side as well, requiring HIPAA. All of that's baked in as well. That's a common question we get. All right, one of my favorites, again, another sleeper, I guess I've used that already on the content piece, but something that I think maybe isn't taken advantage of enough is just-in-time training. So a lot of times your developers, they go to training once a year, right, for like a week or two. And then from there, they're expected to go back in the field and remember everything and deploy everything on a regular basis. But a lot of times what happens is in between training events, the basic industry standards change and requirements change. And we like to think that we really keep up and change with that and with our just-in-time training. So if you have a dev out there that all of a sudden doesn't know what to do with shared keys, secrets, best practices on the current algorithm in play that they need to implement, things of that nature, how to do that, our just-in-time training provides these bite-sized little nuggets associated with the individual tasks, which really allow them to understand what they need to do, how to do it, and take that little bite-sized piece of training right there to allow them to get the task done and move about their day. So it's really something that's a great thing that we make available. Again, it's delivered in the issue tracker, regularly updated, and it's always in line with new regulations and controls. Next slide.
Awesome. So we just have a second poll question here. So this one is, how do you currently provide ATO compliance artifacts to your authorizing authority? So Excel or spreadsheets, Exacta, EMAS, or other external vendor solutions. And if you do select other, if you want to enter that into the chat, that would be great.
Yeah, please do be honest. We're not going to make fun of you if you're still using Excel or spreadsheets. I mean, a good number of the industry operates that way, right? There's nothing to be ashamed of that. And if you are using another solution, we'd love to hear about it. Again, because we're always looking to upgrade our integrations with other tool sets. Wow, good percentage on EMAS. That's good to know. We love the DISA guys. We've been talking to them recently. So looking forward to maybe bringing that to you guys. Right now, the way we do EMAS integration is we have a number of export capabilities that allow you to export the artifacts and reports out of SD elements so you can import them in EMAS or Exacta for your purposes there. All right, thank you, Raquel. Next slide.
No problem. So thank you so much, Jay. That was great. Now I'm going to pass it over to Joseph, and he's going to show us SD elements in action.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Raquel and Jay. Again, my name is Joseph Rowe. I am a solution engineer for Security Campus SD Elements. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. Let's see. Okay. And what I would really like to do today is to walk you through either onboarding a new or an existing application into SD Elements. As Jay went through, we're going to start with a survey. And the survey is essentially asking the question of, what are you building today? Right? What is this application? How does it behave? What's the technology stack in use? What are maybe some compliance or regulatory options that you need to comply with? How is this being deployed? From there, SD Elements is then going to answer two questions, right? What do we do about the problems that we've seen, right? What are the problems that can go wrong, and what do we do about them, right? What are the controls? And those controls are going to include not just a statement of the problem, but a statement of the problem, a very robust solution that'll walk you through the process step by step, and then also include additional content that'll further help the developer, like just-in-time training classes or code snippets, right? Or how-tos for a particular system. That'll then get sent into an issue tracking system like Jira or Azure DevOps or which one you may be using, so that developers can actually consume that right within their workflow. They do not have to learn SD Elements, and when they've completed that task at hand, they can simply check that it's been complete right there within Jira. And that is a bi-directional sync, so we will have traceability back into who did what and when it was done at the end of this. After that, you're probably going to want some additional validation that this has been done correctly. And that's where we're going to bring in your SAS and DAS scanners to give you that additional validation, right? These are no longer a remediation piece as we see it. These are what's giving you validation on what the developer is actually attested to. And then at the end, I'll get into some of the reporting and auditing functionalities that we have. Okay? So we're at the survey, and who's going to fill this out? Well, it's going to be someone that's very familiar with the application at hand. You could think maybe a lead developer, maybe a project manager, maybe a security SME, but it's going to be someone that is very experienced with what you're trying to build today. They can probably expect to spend about 25 to 30 minutes when they first start going through this. And as you mature in that, that time is likely to come down, right? We have multiple things that can help you with that. Now I'm going to walk through the survey and we're going to go through it relatively quickly because really what we want to see is what comes out as a result, okay? So right off the bat, I had selected today that we were building a Java 2E web app, and it's going to ask me architecturally if any of these things apply, right? Maybe we've got a microservice or an IoT ecosystem. Maybe this contains multiple components that communicate through a network. On application type, it's pre-selected that this is a web application since I did select a Java app. When we get to context and characteristics, we can answer specifics about this. Maybe it's a financial application, right? Maybe it handles health data. Maybe it consumes or provides cloud services. And again, on components, it has selected that we're using a database since we are building a web application. And that's going to bring it a scope controls centered around a database. On platform and language, the vast majority of our around 2,000 controls, they start off as being platform and language agnostic. But when we answer these additional questions, like the programming languages, it gives us the ability to bring in additional content to further help those developers, like those code snippets or the how-tos. Real fast, what technologies are we using? Like, what are the database technologies? Is it a SQL or a NoSQL database? And which one in particular are we using? Java technologies for a Java app, and data formats. So features and functions, it's strictly dealing with how are we handling things like authentication or authorization, passwords, session management. What are some of our external dependencies? The protocols that are in use of both the application and the network layer. And then an area I do like to highlight are the compliance requirements. So as an organization, you have the ability to come in here and say, exactly, what laws am I subject to? And when we talk about the DoD or the Fed, it's probably just the USA. But we do have coverage for financial systems or healthcare systems for HIPAA compliance or privacy, if that's in scope for you as well. But what's probably most interesting is the US federal and NIST. So if this application, as so many are, is in scope for NIST RMF, we can simply select that right here, select the impact level that we're tracking against, and we'll be sure to bring in the appropriate controls to make sure that you meet the standard. In addition to that, we have several other ones that are important to the DoD and the Fed, including NIST Cybersecurity Framework, CMMC with its maturity levels, DICAP, ASD STIG, and CNSSI even with its overlays. On to development test tools, we're going to ask, what are you using to build this? Is static and dynamic code analysis in play? And then another area I do like to highlight as well are the deployment options. So in addition to the secure coding guidelines that we've had since this platform has been in existence, we have added in at the request of our clients a bunch of content in regards to the most popular cloud providers. So if you happen to be using AWS, Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud, you can simply select this provider, select these specific services that you're using with this, and you will receive guidance on how to properly configure, deploy, and secure these based off the CIS benchmark. Same thing goes with containerization technology, right? Docker, Kubernetes, OpenShift, or Swarm, again, based off the CIS benchmarks. Now, this is going to be a common thing throughout this, but everything within SD Elements is fully configurable, including even the project survey. So as an organization, you're likely to have security requirements that are maybe unique to your systems. And just to kind of show this, I've added in this section here for data classification. And we can ask, does this handle classified data? And then with that answer, maybe it triggers a custom control as a result of that coming through. So now I will hit save and continue. And we're going to be brought to a section that's going to ask us to select a risk policy for this project. Now, think of this as setting the minimum bar that an application needs to clear in order for this to be considered compliant. And ultimately, this is a filter that gets put on what gets brought into scope. Okay? Immediately, it lets SD Elements say, hey, thumbs up, this is compliant, thumbs down, this is non-compliant. And as an organization, you again would have the ability to set these for your different types of applications. But for the purpose of this, we'll go with a NIST RMF risk policy that's only going to bring into scope controls centered around NIST RMF. And I will hit save and continue. So at this time, we're going to be brought to a list of controls that have been generated based upon potential problems that SD Elements has identified that are tracking against the standard that we put into place, whether it's NIST RMF or CNSSI with its overlays or what have you. Just to level set what we're seeing here, we've got the controls and they're listed out on a priority scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest risk, 1 being the lowest. That's based off the common weakness scoring system by MITRE. Over here, we have the status from SD Elements. Is it complete, not applicable, incomplete, or risk accepted? Now, a big part of what we're doing is we're asking developers to start thinking about security from the very start, from when they either first start making new software or they first start making changes to existing software. So at the end of the day, when you run your scans or your pen test, those don't have much to say other than good things. And again, we're also trying to give them everything that they need in order to comply with a specific standard. Right? The problem with this, generally in the past, is that most developers are not security experts. And they're most surely not experts on NIST RMF or CNSSI with its baselines. So what we've got to do is we've really got to give them everything that they need in order to be successful. And that's really what we've done here. So let's take a look at one of these from the perspective of a developer. Let's say I'm a developer and I've been assigned one of these tasks. And I'm going to use T21, ensure all data in transit is encrypted using secure TLS channel. And of course, this is very universal, and I'm sure everyone knows what this is. Well, let's say as a developer, I open this up and I'm not sure how to accomplish this. Well, as we walk through this, first things first, I've got the problem written out very plainly, and it's easy to understand. But at the same time, it does give me an understanding as a developer as to why it's important that I do this. As I go down further, we've got links to the common weakness enumeration database, so where a developer can click through, learn more about the problem if they choose to. Further on, we've got the solution written out step by step, right? Very granularly, right? How do I actually accomplish this? For instance, do not support SSL, provide support for TLS, refuse and secure ciphers, and et cetera, et cetera. How do I enforce this in all pages? Additional content around the choice of cipher that I should be making. And this includes examples from OWASP recommendations. And then since we did check off that we were actually using Lambda for AWS, it has brought in this additional section right here dynamically. So again, these are not static controls, and there's over 2,000 of them, but they also have many amendments like this that get brought in when additional answers are given to the survey. In addition, at this time, let's say the developer's gone through this, but maybe they could use a little bit more help. So we do have what Jay referred to as just-in-time training courses. And these are short courses. They're 5 to 10 minutes in length. They're highly targeted at the task at hand that a developer can take if they choose to. They can also take a quiz to check their understanding. And then they can take this knowledge that they've learned right here and within the same workflow, implement it immediately. And we believe that this is beneficial to them as opposed to what they normally see, which is security training maybe once or twice a year, where it could be weeks or months before they actually have to use that. And oftentimes they haven't retained a lot of that knowledge. In addition, what's more, the vast majority of our controls, they include how-tos. And these how-tos are specific to how we model the application here. So for example, we selected Java as our programming language. And here we have a Java code snippet that a developer can copy and paste and use as needed. We've also got additional how-tos of how to do something within a particular system. Like, how do we enable an encrypted connection to a database engine? And we did select MySQL as well, and we've got that walkthrough right here for the developer. So the idea here is that the developers have everything at their fingertips in order for them to properly implement this control, right? It's a singular pane of glass, if you will. And at the end of the day, they don't have to ask their neighbors. They don't have to go sifting through multiple knowledge repositories. And they're not going to Google and Stack Overflow where they're copying and pasting something where we have no idea where it came from. And these are fully configurable as well. So if you want to kind of tailor the control to be a little bit more specific to your organization, like maybe you just use TLS 1.3 instead of allowing 1.2, that is fully possible. It's all configurable again through templates. There's no coding required. With that said, this is all within SD elements. And ideally, we do not want the developers to have to work within SD elements. So what I've got here is we've actually done the Jira integration. We've sent these controls over into a developer backlog, and they now have access into it during their regular workflow. And as you can see, we've got much of the same information. We've got the solution written out step by step. How do we enforce this in all pages? What's the choice of cipher that I should be selecting? And down here at the bottom, we're still going to have the how-tos, the code snippets, the walkthroughs for a particular system, and even those just-in-time training courses are available right here within Jira. The developer never has to learn SD elements or goes into it. As Jay said, they could if you want them to, but they can work right here. And when they're done, they simply come over here, check off that it's been done, and that is going to transfer back into SD elements. And we will have traceability back into who did what and when it was done. So just to recap at this point, we have filled out the survey. We've answered the question of what are we building today. SD Elements has generated controls based on potential problems that we've identified that are tracking against the standard that we put into place, whether that's NIST RMF or CNSSI or one of its overlays. At this point, we've sent this over to the developers. The developers have started to work through them. And probably at this point in time, maybe some of them have checked off that they've completed their task. At this point, you're probably going to want additional validation that this has been done correctly, besides just the developers attesting to it. And that's where your issue track, or sorry, where your code scanners are going to come into effect. So I don't know if you've noticed, but over here on the right, the vast majority of our controls include or have some colored flags next to them. And a colored flag indicates that we have some sort of a result back from a scanner. And if we click through to this one, we can see exactly what we got here. So I've uploaded different scanner results. And we've got a red flag here because check marks found a fail, right? It found one or more instances that's related to this problem right here within SD Elements. And if we click through to it, we can see exactly what we got here. So we've got 2 counts of reversible one-way hash. So let's say at this point in time, maybe your developer had signed off and they've marked this complete, but yet when you run your checkmark scan, there's an obvious problem here. So you can actually set up SD Elements to the behavior that when it receives this result, it can automatically change this back to incomplete, send it back into the developer backlog, have them work back through it, at which point they can resubmit and then you can rescan. Okay. From time to time, you may also see these orange flags, and the orange flag, as you'll note here, it says it's a partial pass, and you may ask what this is. So we're saying in this situation that this scanning tool did not find any instance of this problem. But what SD Elements is saying is that we don't have a lot of confidence in this result based on what we know in scanners in general or a particular scanner. So in this situation, let's say your scanner can't validate it with confidence, then we actually include manual testing cases for every one of our controls. So you can run a manual QA test, you can add a manual verification, override it to pass, add a reference in here, something like testing case ran, and then at the end, we'll pull that together with your reports at the end as well. Ideally, what you should be seeing though, if your developers are working through this and they're implementing the control as expected, then you should be seeing mostly green flags, right? Green means you're good to go from the scanner. You'll have the attestation from your developer also attesting that they've done it. And then at the end, we're going to pull both of those together in your reports and your audits, which will really help you and give you that traceability that you need. As we all know, that not only in ATO are there certain things that you have to do, you generally have to show proof that they've been done as well. So at this point, we kind of walked through the process, filled out the survey, generated the controls, tracking against standard. Developers have maybe checked off, maybe your project's been going on for a while, and you've run a couple of scans. You're probably going to want to get some reports or insight into where your project or your application sits as a whole. And we do have a number of different reports that can be run right out of the box. There's 5 in total. There's one that I primarily like to highlight when I'm talking to Fed customers, and that's the compliance report. So we have a number of regulatory mappings, including NIST RMF, right, with its Red 4 and Red 5 as well, is already in the system as well. So I can run a report in a matter of seconds and get a snapshot of where my application sits in regards to this particular standard that's been put into place. And what it's going to do is actually going to break this down section by section so that we can actually see what needs to be done to satisfy each section of NIST RMF. And as this goes down further, it's going to start with AC1. And as we get down to AC2, we can see that we've got a couple of things that are in scope here. So first off, we get a description of it, right? We can see that we've got 1 in scope from architecture and design, 1 from the activities phase, and then we've got a couple of, quite a few that are out of scope for this project. Not only do we have the particular controls that are needed to satisfy this section, but we've got the information on them as well. For example, we can see this one's currently a priority 7 from SD Elements. Its status is incomplete. It was last modified by this person. It was last modified on this date. And we've got a partial pass from our scanning tool. And this report also includes who last either did the verification or did the manual override on it, should you be using a QA test or something along those lines. Okay. Not only do we have what's in scope for this, but we also include what's not in scope for this. And you may ask, well, what are these? So these are controls that could potentially be in scope for this section of NIST, but they're not in scope for this particular project because of how we answer the survey. And essentially, what technologies you're using, right? What the application is doing. So for example, we leave these in here because you might take a look and say, hey, wait a second, we're doing this. We need to go back, take a look at our survey, find out what we missed, at which point we can correct it, rerun this, and then get a good outlook on what actually needs to be done. When we talk about what our other clients have done with SD Elements, this is a big part of the process. And realistically, a lot of times for the places that have been able to achieve rapid ATO, they require the applications to go through this entire process. Whenever they make changes to existing software or whenever they make new software, right? They've got to run through the survey generates controls, those get sent over to the issue trackers, developers work through them, they run their scans, and at the end of the day, they come to a slightly modified version of, say, this NIST report or the CNSSI report that they've sat down with their assessor, made some agreed upon changes, right? And then they can print this off or run this at the end of the project and say, look, Mr. or Mrs. Assessor, here's a standard that we agreed to. Here's what was generated to be done. Here's who's done what and when. And here's proof from our scanner. This has actually been done correctly. And that's really what's helped to really facilitate the change in time from 6 months, 9 months, 12 months down to 1 month, 2 months, 3 months instead. So with that said, I've kind of walked through the process. Again, I thank you for your time, and I'll hand this back to Raquel.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that deep dive into SD elements. So at this point, we're going to jump into our Q&A session, but we do have one more poll question that I am going to throw up here. So the last poll question we have for you is, which most closely matches your approach to ATO? So we work with a manual checklist. We enable ATO through our task tracking process. We have an automated process, or we are currently planning how we will address ATO for our applications. All right, and while we're just waiting for a few more responses to come in, like I mentioned, we are now going to be opening it up for any questions. And as a quick reminder, if you have not had a chance to answer your question, or sorry, to ask your question, please do so now into the Q&A box. I'll share the results here.
It's a good spread.
Perfect. So the first question that we have here is, what platforms for installation does SDE currently support? And what are the common platforms being adopted across Fed and DoD?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So to answer that, we do actually have both SaaS and on-prem versions that can actually be deployed to your own cloud or to your own on-site deployments. Our SaaS version is not FedRAMP. So generally speaking, in the DoD and the federal space, they usually go with either our container or our OVA. And lately, it's been our containerized version that most of them go with, since it's an Iron Bank.
We do have two containers. We have a commercial container and an Iron Bank approved container.
Awesome. So another question that we had come in is, what is the impact of installing on-premise for Fed/DoD customers versus the traditional SaaS product?
I mean, you've got to stand it up, of course, in your own environment rather than having us stand it up for you in a SaaS environment. But with that said, the containerized process is very well documented, and it's the feedback that we've gotten is that it's very easy to get up and running.
Perfect. Who specifically are the day-to-day users of SD elements within the government?
Yeah, so that does vary between, within an organization and by organization. With that said, it's usually not the developers. Generally speaking, they're going to be consuming their guidance within Jira. So it's usually going to be, maybe the security SMEs or the assessors and the compliance people on the back end that are kind of consuming the resources there.
Yeah, I agree with that, Joseph. We see a number of the cyber leads who are running the implementation of SDE, and they kind of work as a balance against the ISO.
Perfect. And we had one question come in that says, do you support FedRAMP ATO?
Yeah, so FedRAMP is actually one of the standards that we do have mappings to. It's actually, I didn't go over the section because it's not outside of the US federal in this section, but instead of in the cloud section. But absolutely, we do have a mapping for FedRAMP, so you can use it for that as well.
And does this comply with CMMC? Is one of the questions we got.
Yeah, so we do have CMMC along with all of its impact, or all of its levels are the 5 that exist.
And we'll be working with the AB in the future to ensure we're part of that community as well.
Awesome. So we have a few more that came in. So how do security requirements get delivered to developers, and how exactly does this work?
Yeah, so when we generate the controls as a result of what gets answered in the survey, right, the questionnaire, and then generally speaking, the developers receive them in their issue tracker of choice. That's either Jira, Azure DevOps, version 1, GitLab, GitHub. There's generally around 10 or 12 of them. So they see the same guidance, right? The step-by-step solution, also the how-tos and the code snippets. And even those just-in-time training courses are all available within the issue tracker for them to receive, so they don't have to actually log into SD Elements.
Perfect. And this question kind of ties into what you were talking about, but the question here is, how is security training included in SD Elements? Who can get this training? And is there any testing or certification associated with this training?
Yes, so the training classes that are available are what we refer to as just-in-time modules, training modules. Those are kind of cut down snippets of our larger training catalog, and they're available really to anyone that's receiving the guidance in their, issue tracker backlog, or anyone that can access SD Elements. There is not a certification that comes from the just-in-time training as it is for right now.
But on our training side, we do offer one with ISC in collaboration, if you're interested in learning more about that.
Awesome. So we have time for a few more, and we have one here. What kind of reports does SD Elements provide? Who can see them, and how can they be used with auditors?
Yeah, so the main one, I think, when we're talking about the ATO is the compliance reports, and again, we have I think it's about 65 frameworks that are mapped, including most of the ones that we just went through that are important to the federal government. So basically, anyone that has permissions to see them can see them, you can set those permissions within SD Elements. The other reports that are included are something called a problem summary report, which is kind of like a threat modeling light report. It kind of looks similar to what I showed from the compliance report, but instead of breaking it down section by section of a particular standard, it's actually going to break it down problem by problem. It'll say, hey, here's all the problems that we identified. And then below each problem, it'll list out every control that's been prescribed to mitigate them. And then we have also some kind of, more general high-level views of like, are you compliant with your risk policy? What are the risk policy tasks that are not completed, et cetera.
And just a caveat on that, we also have a very robust API set as well. So if you're looking to automate pulling that report data, there's capabilities for doing that as well.
Awesome. So I know you talked a bit about the research team, so we have a question that came in towards that. So the question is, what process does your research team use to stay current with changes to NIST standards like NIST 853?
Yeah, so it's a very large team, and they're industry experts with many years of experience beyond them, and they also talk to other industry experts and follow best practices. So for instance, you asked about NIST 800-53. As I'm sure you know, Rev 5 is out. It's a lot of organizations are going to be required to use it, and I think either September or October. Well, we actually had Rev 5 available within SD Elements back in February. So we're far out ahead of this. So they stay on top of things. That's one of the benefits of what we do here, is that you don't have to worry about staying on top of it because we're giving you the updates as need be.
Perfect. And the last question that we have here as of now is, what reductions in time to achieve ATO have government agencies using SD Elements actually seen? And are there any metrics or data that provide a before and after picture?
Yeah, so we do have some case studies, I think, that Jay mentioned before. Jay also mentioned some teams within other organizations have got it down to 1 week in a lot of cases, or in a few cases. Also, I think taking it down to 1 month, 2 months, 3 months is something that a lot of us have seen as well, which is a lot less than kind of the 4 to 6 months at the minimum that we saw within the poll.
Yeah, there are a number of teams that have got their CI/CD pipeline down in their ATO process at less than a week. We've even seen some half of that on certain instances. So it's been really impressive in the implementation for ATO.
Awesome. So that was all of the questions that came in through the Q&A chat. And again, if you think of a question that you want to ask Jay or Joseph, please do not hesitate to email contact@securitycompass.com. So again, thank you very much, Jay and Joseph, for a very informative and engaging session. As always, if you are interested in speaking with a Security Compass Fed DoD expert, please fill in the contact form with your information. This form will be added to the chat box as well as included in the email with today's recording. And if you like today's webinar, please feel free to check out the resources section of our website to see any upcoming webinars that we have scheduled. Once again, thank you so much to our speakers today, as well as our audience. You've been extremely engaged with today's webinar, so please stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.